Look down at the keyboard on your phone or laptop. The arrangement of those letters makes almost no logical sense. The most common letters aren't clustered together, and the layout doesn't prioritize speed. Yet billions of people type on it every single day. This layout, known as QWERTY, was engineered in the 1870s for early typewriters like this Remington. If you look closely at these metal striking arms, you can see the engineering problem they faced. If a typist pressed neighboring keys too quickly, the mechanical arms would collide and jam in the center. QWERTY was intentionally designed to space out common letter pairs, forcing the typist to slow down and preventing those physical jams. Fast forward a century and a half, you're typing on a piece of solid glass. There are no mechanical arms to jam. We are still adhering to a layout specifically engineered to solve a 19th century mechanical limitation that no longer exists. This is a classic example of path dependence. In economics and sociology, this principle explains how our current reality is frequently constrained by a specific sequence of historical events, rather than current logic, efficiency, or technical superiority. Think of it like walking across a field of deep, unbroken snow. The first person to cross leaves a trail of footprints that might wander a bit randomly. The second person to cross will naturally step into those exact same footprints because it takes less energy. By the 10th person, there is a deep, packed trail. Even if someone calculates a shorter, faster route later on, people will continue using the established trail because stepping out into the fresh snow requires too much physical effort. Those initial, highly contingent choices create an invisible gravitational pull. Over time, that pull dictates the software on our devices, the structures of our organizations, and the physical foundations of the global economy. This chart shows how that gravitational pull works, driven by increasing returns. As an initial design gains adoption, the benefits of sticking with it compound. Simultaneously, the cost of switching spikes exponentially. Eventually, the system hits lock-in, rendering competing paths unviable. You can see this lock-in permanently etched into our physical infrastructure. Take the standard gauge of North American and European railroads, exactly 4 feet 8.5 inches wide. That highly specific measurement was carried over by English engineers who based early train axles on the jigs used to build horse-drawn wagons. Those wagon dimensions were originally designed to fit the deep ruts carved into long-distance roads centuries earlier by imperial Roman war chariots. The ripple effect of that ancient Roman constraint extends all the way to modern aerospace engineering. The space shuttle's solid rocket boosters, the 2 white cylinders attached to the sides of the shuttle, had to be shipped by train from a factory in Utah to the launch pad in Florida. Because that train had to pass through a specific tunnel in the mountains, the maximum width of humanity's most advanced rocket was ultimately dictated by the width of a Roman chariot. Arbitrary design decisions made 2 millennia ago created physical boundaries that we still engineer around today. This concept explains the extreme friction in transitioning to global energy grade. We are looking at a vast, dense network of oil refineries, pipelines, and storage facilities. This infrastructure represents trillions of dollars in sunk costs, irreversible investments made over decades to extract, process, and transport one specific type of fuel. Even as solar and wind energy demonstrate higher long-term efficiency and lower environmental impact, the global logistics network remains heavily tilted toward petroleum. The sheer mass of the established system resists the shift. In business, this exact dynamic creates what organizational theorists call a competency trap. When a company becomes highly specialized and exceptionally profitable following one specific path, its internal structures harden. They become so optimized for their current success that they develop severe institutional blindness to new market realities. The Eastman Kodak company fell perfectly into this trap. Kodak actually invented the digital camera in 1975. But look at this heavy industrial legacy. Factories built to manufacture, coat, and process chemical film. Their massive investments in analog infrastructure and the immense profits from selling film processing chemicals made it organizationally impossible for them to pivot to digital until it was far too late. The self-reinforcing processes that build market dominance eventually reverse. What begins as a massive strategic advantage hardens into fatal organizational rigidity. Path dependence is not an inescapable destiny. Organizations and societies can break out of these historical corridors, but it requires a deliberate and often painful disruption of the status quo. Researchers define this breakout process as mindful deviation, or path creation. It is the strategic, intentional act of stepping off the historically entrenched trail and absorbing the high initial costs of forging a new one. The first step in mindful deviation is recognizing an external shock, a sudden market crash, a regulatory shift, or a rapid technological leap, and using that external pressure to shatter the organization's reliance on its past successes. The second step is structural reconfiguration. Companies attempting to survive massive technological disruptions have to build their new initiatives in total isolation. If a new, unproven technology is left inside the core business, the weight of legacy systems and traditional profit metrics will smother it. IBM successfully executed this in the 1990s. The company was entirely defined by the production of massive, room-filling physical hardware. To survive the personal computing revolution, leadership had to aggressively wall off new divisions and pivot the company's core focus toward intangible software and IT services, escaping the very hardware path that made them famous. This requires a final, highly difficult step: unlearning. Leaders have to actively dismantle the specific competencies that generated their early wealth, retrain their workforce, and cultivate entirely new external networks and partnerships. Inventing a superior tool is only half the battle. True innovation demands the strategic willpower to identify the constraints inherited from the past, step out into the unbroken snow, and derail the invisible rails of history.